Welcome back to the AI Caveman podcast. The purpose of this channel is teaching you how to use AI tools to protect your business, to protect what you have built, stay informed. But today we need to talk about the physical world behind those tools. Because when you ask ChatGPT a question, or you ask Claude to write you some code, that query doesn't happen in the clouds. It's not magic. It happens here. Maybe soon in your own neighborhood, inside giant electronic filled warehouses called data centers. I have to apologize that this video didn't come out earlier. When I started on this video, I thought this would be relatively straightforward, right? I thought it would be a straightforward issue. The data center issue is not straightforward. It is tied into seemingly everything, from geopolitics to, nuclear energy, to a looming supply chain shortage, to possibly some weaknesses in democracy itself. So today we're going to talk about what looks to be the largest public works private industry crossover project that's ever been attempted. Yes, you did hear that correctly. That is just how big this is. Sounds like an exaggeration. Well, it's not. Strap in, because that's exactly where over a month of research has landed me. I made the statement that I'm now far more worried about data centers than I was when I started, but for really none of the reasons that I expected to be. And I'll admit, this video does get a bit dark, but I promise it does end with some hope, good deal of hope actually, because behind every challenge is an opportunity, and I do believe that. Today involves government corruption, CIA levels of secrecy, shell companies, and industrial ambition at truly unprecedented levels. And of course, it involves a technology that's going to change every aspect of all of our lives. And it's a technology that we need. Whether we like it or not, whether we love it or hate it, the nature of AI makes it the only way forward. And the absolute worst thing that you could do is to not utilize it from this day forward. Remember, this is one of the truest statements I think have ever been made concerning AI and how it plays out into the world to date. AI is probably not going to take your job. Some jobs, maybe, but AI is probably not going to take your job. But someone who uses AI will. And I get it. No one likes when something seems forced on them. And in many ways, it seems like AI and data centers are being forced on us. But those are the cards that we have been dealt at this point. So do not let what is happening with data centers and AI prevent you from leveraging AI. First, because it's not going to make a difference. And secondly, it really only hurts you. It doesn't help anyone. So there's something you need to understand if you want to be fluent in this issue of data centers. And that is that you have to realize that data centers are not one single issue. The term data center, when it's used, represents at least two entirely separate issues. The argument could be made that it's actually thousands of individual issues, but we're going to focus on the two main issues today, and they are the local issue and the national or regional issue. The local issue is, should we build this specific data center in this specific location with a specific set of risks and impacts and the local benefits? And then there's the national or the regional data center issue. And that is the plan to build all of the data centers that we're going to need. And that plan is inexorably tied to our infrastructure plan, which is also tied to our power production plan. And both of those are huge undertakings in and of themselves, even outside of the data center plan. The local individual data center plans are actually getting more national attention than the national plan is, or at least it seems to be for now. And that concerns me. But we're going to focus on the local data center issue first. Here's the deal. There isn't an episode out there that can tell you if you should build the next data center in your hometown, because that requires local, geographically specific context. But this is where most of the attention is. The data center here did this to all of the fish. The data center there is making people sick. this data center will use more water than SeaWorld does in a day. But the problem is that those aren't your data center. You can't compare or contrast your data center, the one that's coming to your hometown, with the hyperscale facility that Google is building states away from you that also comes with its own modular nuclear power plant, because that's not what's being built in your hometown. And it's likely that none of those things that you hear about another data center is going to be relevant to yours. So if you confuse the issue around a data center you saw built in an entirely different place, and by the way, usually only the worst cases make it to the news. So if you confuse that for the one you heard about in an entirely different place, that is an entirely different size and a different model than your data center, with the arguments about your proposed facility, you'll probably lose that argument at the town hall meeting. Because, by the way, you're not going to be alone at that town hall meeting. Big tech advocates and lobbyists have been very busy, and you will see them at your local town halls, or maybe you won't. But either way, they're there, and they're probably already there before you are, and they're probably more involved than you are. And they're prepared. Many of them are trained in law. So they're going to take your misplaced, inapplicable arguments, brand you an outlier or misinformed or confused or maybe even a conspiracy theorist, and they're going to have their data center. They're going to have that approved in no time, because here's a number, one of the first numbers I think you should want to remember. I just spoke with a gentleman. We just filmed a podcast about 2 weeks ago who's on the front line of this issue, the data center and AI issue. And he told me directly that on average about $250,000 a day is being spent lobbying for AI and data centers. So remember that. So if you do actually want to push back, you have to make sure that you're actually arguing against that data center project, not another example somewhere else. Which brings me to problem number one, big problem number one. There's a massive amount of disinformation, like a total lack of context behind the info that we do have, and a strikingly absent level of transparency from local, state, and federal public officials. I've been at this for over a month now, reading, researching, re-researching, listening, writing, rewriting, and I have hit so many dead ends. And this is interesting, but I've been called a traitor, a hippie, a liberal, and a conservative in some of the most colorful language possible, just for asking these questions in the wrong places. I'm not looking for sympathy here. That part was actually one of the most entertaining during this time. I just wanted to give you a heads up. If you do go down that road on your own, it is a mess out there. This video originally started off with me attempting to basically debunk like the 5 or 10 most ridiculous claims that I had seen about data centers. But it was my mistake when I assumed that the internet wouldn't daily outdo itself on just how ridiculous it could be. I was just chasing my tail. And I started to see a trend. The more ridiculous a claim was, the more outlandish, the more apocalyptic a post or an article's headline was, the more interaction it had. Even if it was just the title. Even just the title was outlandish, it would get more attention. Even if the body of the article actually walked that statement back a little bit, no one was even reading the article or the text, just the headlines. And if you go down these rabbit holes, you're going to find all kinds of numbers, all kinds of statistics. But what you won't find is a whole lot of context for those numbers. And that is a problem, because statistics and numbers without context are basically useless. They only serve to get clicks and views and shock people. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but only if they're actually shocking numbers, and there are some. But shock and outrage alone don't make good arguments, right? Feelings and emotions are important. They matter. But they don't win debates, or at least they shouldn't. And they aren't great metrics to use with long-term national impact decisions. Here's an example of what I mean. I once saw a video, and you may have seen this video as well, where people were going around in a small town with a petition to remove highly dangerous levels of dihydrogen monoxide from a local school's water supply. They had done some testing and found it. People were signing that thing left and right. They're being informed that dihydrogen monoxide is the main chemical used in industrial fire suppression systems. And that just doesn't sound like something you want around your kids, right? No, of course not. So the last part of that petition was that this chemical has actually been responsible for 5,000 deaths just in the U.S. just last year. It is lethal. But of course, the only way it can kill you is if you drowned in it, because dihydrogen monoxide is H2O. It's just water. But you get the sense that that just isn't an honest way of presenting the facts, right? It's not really fair, and it's definitely not just a lack of intelligence on the people's parts who were signing that petition, is it? It's taking advantage of people's good nature and the desire to be generally helpful. So as a society, thankfully, when we see well-dressed, courteous people bringing up an issue that they're passionate about, most of our default reactions are, oh no, that sounds bad, right? They're putting effort towards that, and that sounds bad, and I don't want bad things to happen. So yes, I'll sign it. I want to protect the kids. And I think that's the same phenomenon that's taking hold of the data center debate on both sides, by the way. Well-meaning people are resharing a mountain of nonsense. Like the level of raw, unfounded garbage being posted about data centers is heroic. It's so heroic that I don't actually blame anybody for being misled, because surely it can't all be wrong, right? That's sort of the feeling that you get. So here's our first solution, because we don't only want to talk about problems on this channel, right? We want to talk about solutions. And the solution is this. I'll keep this solution limited to just data centers for now, although it probably applies across the board. Ignore all posts you see about data centers on social media. Is there some possibility that there's some truth in there? Yeah, probably. But the ratio of truth to not truth just makes it not worth your time. Unfortunately, it does seem like this is where most people are getting their info about data centers, and that is a problem. This misinformation affects everything. The people who are originally posting this junk that know it's not true are killing the public's ability to form any solid argument, and they're just causing confusion. As a matter of fact, I don't think big tech could do a better job at muddying the waters around this issue if they were literally paying these people to work for them. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that there is an intentional, like an organized or deliberate effort to misinform people about data centers, but if I'm honest, I wouldn't be completely blown away if someday we found out that there was, some evidence to that effect. So long story short, do not take your data center facts from a social media post to your town hall meeting, or you're going to get eaten alive. Remember, $250,000 a day and trillion-dollar companies are on the other side of that argument. So we're not going to spend too much time on how bad social media is. I doubt that's a surprise to anybody, but let's wrap this up with an actual example of what I would call the typical data center post, which I did not pull from social media. I pulled directly from a major media outlet, so you would hope it would be a little better. Did you know that a large hyperscale data center draws a staggering 87 million kilowatt hours per year for just one facility? That sounds scary, right? But first, what the hell does a hyperscale even mean, right? We can't even make it partially into this headline without something that just doesn't have a reference. Is that just a large facility? Is there an Uber scale that's bigger than that? Is that actually average? Or is it just another made-up word without any standard definition or reference? I think we know the answer to that. Here's the reality. Your local grid, power grid, can probably absorb a single average data center, and you might not even immediately see a difference in your monthly bill. That 87 million number is for a massive hyperscale facility, but they aren't built all the same. They're probably not going to be a hyperscale facility in your backyard. In fact, there are dozens and dozens of different types and sizes of data centers. So without context, that number means literally nothing. So let's give it a little context. The average American home uses about 30 kilowatt hours a day, not a year, because what what something uses in a year is one of the least important metrics as far as power grids go. So let's do a little bit of caveman math. One medium-sized, right, regular data center uses the same amount of power in a year as about 10,000 mid-sized homes. Still, numbers that big don't compute easily. They just kind of sound scary. But at least now we're comparing an average home usage with an average data center usage. So for reference, our smallest state, Rhode Island, has about 500,000 homes in it. So if we got rid of all of the homes in Rhode Island, we could replace their total electric draw with just 50 average data centers. And we are planning on building a whole lot more than 50 average size data centers nationwide. So now that scale starts to make a little bit of sense. And it is legitimately concerning on a national level. So why do we see so many media outlets using bad math and sensationalized comparisons when the actual truth is already concerning? Again, it is concerning that one average data center uses the same amount of energy as 10,000 homes. We would be worried if we started building 10,000 person real estate projects everywhere all over the country, because you have to plan for that, right? If Rhode Island decided, tomorrow that they were going to add another, even 5,000 homes, that's kind of a big deal and it requires a plan. The issue in particular, this issue, has just been beat to death. And I've seen comparison numbers anywhere from one data center uses the same as 2,500 homes to one data center uses more than 100,000 homes. The point here is that really, regardless of what the average is, it may have zero relevance to your local data center. What matters to you is, can your local power grid handle this? It seems like the answer to that question, at least for a while, is going to be yes, the local power grid can support that. But eventually the answer is going to have to be no. And we're heading there pretty fast. You can only put so many straws on that camel's back before it breaks. Which brings us to problem number 2. And what I like to call the you are crowd. We get stuck arguing over things that either just aren't true or at least don't matter to the situation at hand, which distracts us from what we actually should be worried about in any one given case. For example, total annual electricity usage is not how power grids work, and yet it's probably the most commonly stated figure around data centers. Data centers use X amount a year, or data centers use 5 times X amount a year, or this data center does that. Arguing over what the average data center yearly usage is a dead end. It doesn't matter. But it's not really why or how power grids fail either. And I can tell you this, it is entirely possible to have the total electricity produced in a year, this number, to be twice the amount that we actually use in a year and still have blackouts. We're going to get to that. But first, we have to talk about how to get the information about your local data center proposal. Remember, national averages don't matter to you. The other data center doesn't matter to you. What is your data center going to use? You need to ask specific questions about the actual data center proposed in your area. But I kind of have to warn you here. I don't have great news on the success rate of actually getting those answers, because I have never seen so many non-disclosure agreements and secrecy surrounding a non-military issue. NDAs for city council members, local politicians, NDAs for contractors, developers, for power companies. And when there aren't NDAs, there are shell companies. The level of secrecy around this kind of seems a bit concerning and honestly absurd. It's an absolute travesty that a public official can sign an NDA that prevents open transparency about an industrial build-out in a community that they're supposed to be representing. The issue of public officials signing NDAs to hide information, or at least keep it from them, from their constituents is evil and it's un-American at its core. And I don't think anyone can argue that in good faith. If your local politician says, hey, unfortunately, I can't disclose that to you because I signed an NDA, it is already over. You are getting a data center, and you probably shouldn't vote for that person again, because we need them to fight for us, not for big tech or anybody else. Again, if we put this situation on a fight card, in this corner, we have trillion-dollar tech giants, huge energy conglomerates, gigantic, shady private equity firms versus, your local first-year politician and a handful of rowdy farmers. Like, the odds are already stacked up against us. So this lack of transparency is scary. And when you look at the money involved, again, about $250,000 a day is spent lobbying for AI and data centers. But more importantly, in this industry, we have companies edging on trillion-dollar valuations. That's with a T, right? Trillion, not billion. One of the largest in this industry started as a nonprofit and is now publicly valued at a little over $800 billion. There are unprecedented amounts of money involved in this, and there's already some pretty questionable history. So if the amount of money involved in an industry has any correlation to how much corruption will be created in that industry, then I think logic says we ought to pay this issue some particular attention. And because this is an issue on both the national and local levels, because again, every single individual local data center is going to put strain on our regional grid. In reality, every local data center does affect the nation, right? Back to the camel and those straws on his back. I see so many arguments against data centers get bogged down in this, and they just don't hold up. I spent a month chasing down data center boogeymen, whether that was some nasty new chemical in the coolant, the water runoff, or low frequency hums that are making people sick. And there's tons of issues like that out there. So let me boil all these arguments down and oversimplify them, immensely. All of these issues are actually risks. Kind of bad news, but here's the good news. All of them, or at least the majority of them, would require someone to do something that is already highly illegal in order for it to affect you. So here's what I mean. There is some nasty chemicals involved in some data centers, but in order for that to get into a water supply or local lake, about a dozen federal and state laws have to be broken already. Do they produce, low frequency hums and a lot of noise? Yes, absolutely. Some data centers are loud. But if it's built 5 or 10 miles away from a population center, you're just not going to hear it. So let's just stop. I want to give you a quick breakdown of how you should deal with your data center proposal in your hometown. And remember, this doesn't mean getting a data center in your hometown is by no means a death sentence. This is actually working out for some communities. So to start off with, demand impact studies. Get the numbers on the books. Make them public. Don't accept national averages on anything, right? The answers have to be specific about the proposed plan, not something that happened in Wichita, Kansas. Doesn't matter to you. Let it be known, if it's not already too late, that NDAs for local officials will not be tolerated. And if they do accept them and sign them, that's the last term they're going to serve. Demand transparency about tax breaks, because there's a ton of that. Demand concessions from the data center. There's nothing wrong with asking for concessions. Demand to know how many jobs are going to be created. By the way, not how many jobs will be created while building it. That's only for like 6 to 18 months and those folks leave. How many jobs are going to be created and last in that data center? And if all this seems daunting, here's a tip. Use AI to help you research and understand this, because here's one way AI is giving power back to the people. Gone are the days where a 1,300-page bill that is just, packed full of special interest and kickbacks and unregulated pork gets passed because no one could possibly read it in the time before it gets passed. Throw that bill into ChatGPT, or actually better yet, throw it into something like Perplexity, and it will make that bill a searchable document. It'll tear it to pieces. They don't They don't want you showing up prepared most of the times. But guess what? We have a lot of the same tools that they do. And citizens absolutely have every right to ask the question, what are you going to do for us? Any other industrial facility of that size would also be scrutinized. The citizens would also ask, how is this going to benefit us? And again, there's nothing wrong with doing that with data centers. Because here's the not so secret about NDAs. NDAs don't mean that there isn't information. Kind of the opposite. NDAs mean that not everybody can share that information with you. But they have to have detailed schematics for these projects. They have to have insanely detailed engineering documentation to build a data center. They know what these numbers are. It's not a guess or a surprise to them. You can't build these things without first knowing what it's going to take to run them. And again, make these numbers public or demand the reasons why they can't be public. So in short, treat data centers like any other industrial site that would be built in your local hometown or wherever they're being built. And this is how you solve the local data center challenge or problem. It's not guaranteed that every data center is going to be a win, but it's how we have addressed this challenge before. And data centers, honestly, outside of how much power and sometimes water that they use, are actually somewhat on the milder side of potential industrial facilities that could be built in your local hometown. We can do this, and we are doing this on a national level. Recently, I think I saw like 60 to 65% of all initially proposed data center plans were being rejected, and they had to go elsewhere. So does this mean that that AI Caveman podcast is so pro data center everywhere, build them all the time? Absolutely not. I believe communities that don't want data centers shouldn't get data centers. I just don't want anybody fighting against them for the wrong reasons, because there are actually some pretty big benefits and some seemingly great deals have been made, although those don't seem to make the news. To be clear, it does seem that you can integrate data centers into a community and it be a gigantic benefit. But you have to know what to ask, and you have to ask the questions. And unfortunately, you have to have strong local government representation. Remember that fight card that we talk about. Remember who's on this side, and remember who's on your side. Remember the money that's on this side. But during this past month, I got worried that even though we may be winning the local data center challenge, the issue, we might be missing the forest for the trees. The truth about data centers, again, is that there isn't a single truth about them, right? There isn't an individual solid universal truth about data centers. Not until you force those who are building them and those who are representing you in local government to give you the details about that data center. The only universal truth about data centers is that they add up. Where, hey, one more probably just isn't going to matter. But eventually the sum of just one more will break the system. Here's what I mean. It's very common for proponents of data centers to say, don't worry, we generate enough total units of electricity, of energy every year. Remember when I said you could generate twice what you need in a year and still have blackouts? Because electrical energy isn't a bucket that you fill up in January and scoop it out as you need it. It has to be a constant, uninterrupted flow. Think of it like a freshwater spring. This analogy actually works for both electricity and water usage of data centers. So your spring, let's say it only produces 1 gallon of water a day. So over the course of a year, you have 365 gallons of water. So how could that spring ever run dry if your family only uses, on average, a half a gallon a day, or a little more than 180 gallons a year? And your average daily use is only a half a gallon, less than half of the total that gets produced in a year. What if on the hottest day of summer in Florida, your family needs 2 gallons of water in a single day? Well, your spring can only produce 1 gallon a day. Even though your average is much lower than that. The spring runs dry. The pump fails. The system crashes. And that's what a blackout is. It doesn't matter what your annual average is. If you can't produce enough electricity at any 1 second to meet the peak of usage every day of that year, you get blackouts, or you get government mandated usages and eventually government mandated blackouts. So you might ask, well, why can't we just store the electricity, right? Seems like a simple answer, but the simple answer is no, we can't. We currently only have the grid capacity to store less than 1% of what we need as far as electricity goes, because electricity is a constant flow, and power production must meet the peak demand every single moment of every single day of that year. So when you look at the grid failures in places like California, they don't happen all year long. They happen during peak usage times, which brings us to the next issue. Even if the nation has enough power, that doesn't mean you do. That doesn't mean your local hometown does. Electricity has a physical distance limit. Once you push power past about 300 miles, resistance and heat take over. You start melting transmission wires just to move the current, just to push the current through. The harder the wires get, the more resistance they create, which makes them hotter. It's a loop, and unless we can find a way around physics, that's not going to change. You have to build the power plants near the data centers or population centers. Now, I say near data centers because, again, one average data center is the equivalent of a small town full of people popping up in like 6 months. Do you see how the problems are starting to add up? Not so much on the individual level, but that just one more problem. So to use the spring analogy to kind of tie this together, if you have to walk 100 miles in the summer heat just to get your fresh water, you're going to sweat out more water on that journey than you can use, right? The trip becomes completely useless. So the solution can't be just to build as many power plants as fast as we can. They have to be in the right places. As much as some people might want to, clear out Ohio and make it all power plants, all power production facilities, that's not going to help California. It's not going to help Florida. And kind of brings me to problem number 3. There is a lack of strategic, coordinated plan for power production, power infrastructure, power distribution. And each part of what I just said are separate things, and they're huge endeavors in and of themselves. We seem to be so focused on just data centers, and specifically events surrounding local data centers, and kind of completely ignoring the plan as a whole. I've seen the proposed national efforts, and I'm going to tell you that the math just simply doesn't add up. It just doesn't. And a lot is going to have to change, like now. And things are already starting to break in some areas. So what's the real problem here, right? We need more power plants. So what? Well, the answer to that is it's the time. It's the time that it takes to actually build a power plant in the 2020s. And it's the power plants have to be in the right places. So again, we're limited by timeline, and we're limited to geographic proximity to where the power is actually needed. So if you agree to too many data centers, you are also agreeing that you will also need to build power plants near them. And you can't just build a power plant wherever you want, especially not nuclear power plants. And we are going to need nuclear power plants. So what does it take to build a power plant versus a data center? Let's do the math. This is problem number 4, the timeline and the production ratio. First, again, data centers. It takes about 6 to 18 months, again, on average, to build a data center. And really anyone with enough money or a loan can do it and are doing it. Data centers are not really a new technology. Arranged in the way they are, at the scale they are, sure. I have personally looked into building them, and there are some general guidelines. They do get a bit expensive, but really there's no tight standards on who and where can build the next data center. You can build a bunch of small ones, a few medium ones, one large one, whatever you want. Now let's look at the plan. The timeline of how you build a power plant. And this is where some really big question marks should start popping up. Unfortunately, as of today, it takes 7 to 10 years on average to to build a power plant in the United States. So even if we started today, and we aren't, we're actually closing power plants as of last year in favor of green power production. And I'm not against green energy. I love this earth. But the nature of green energy means it isn't viable for the needs that data centers are creating. Full stop, period, end of sentence. You would need about 20 square miles of solar panels in Florida to match the output of one modern nuclear power plant. And if you think people were pissed about land that data centers are going to occupy, how do you think people will react to having to drive 15 minutes just to get out of a solar panel field? And even if you could do that, it's not going to work in places like Pennsylvania where it's cloudy half the year, right? The math simply doesn't math on green energy alone being the solution here. Probably not even fossil fuels and green energy. It looks like nuclear energy is our only viable way forward. But all that is an episode in and of itself later. Okay, so there's a problem. So how much power will we actually need for all of these new data centers? I don't know. And it doesn't seem like anybody does. That number is likely hiding somewhere behind some NDAs and some shell companies and some doublespeak. We don't really know what we need to build or when we're going to need it. And back to that problem number one, misinformation, lack of context, and a lack of transparency from our leaders, from our government about what it takes to build and support these things. But we need to know, because we can't start building power infrastructure once we finally realize that we have a problem with our grid. Because again, it takes about a decade to build a power plant. And that's just the power plant. That's not transmission lines. That's not distribution. So we are getting all kinds of claims about the future usage of AI, future power usage. And we're told that data centers may need to double the current electrical consumption of the United States in the next 10, 15, or 20 years. Some claims say that we actually might need to more than double it. And by the way, those numbers don't usually include normal growth from just being a country that develops itself. This video isn't about politics or who made that claim, because honestly, whichever number you pick, the bottleneck is kind of identical, right? Building a data center is fast and easy, comparatively. Building a power plant and integrating it into a regional grid is slow. It's incredibly difficult, and it takes years just to plan it in most cases. Doubling our power production alone, which we're told we may have to do as a country, is a statement that simply doesn't make any sense in a reasonable amount of time, at least with how things stand now. And that isn't even including power lines again. That's not including the transmission lines, the substations. That's just the power plants. It looks like some really, really big changes are coming. And I want this next part to sink in, because it gives you some perspective on what it took to get our power grid where it is today. The first commercial power plant in the U.S. opened in September of 1882. And we just kept on building after that, right? I think in the 60s, at some point, we were building 2 or 3 new nuclear power plants a year. But you might say, but don't we have better technology, right? Don't we have better resources now? It took us 150 years to build the first one. And that was backbreaking work. People died during that work. That took a ton of money and companies willing to take the risk on building a power plant. And we're being told that we have to build another one of the exact same size while maintaining the old one in about a tenth of the time. The problem is that we're trying to do all of this in an era of heavy environmental regulations. So do we have better technology and resources and logistics? Yes. Yes, we do. But building anything right now is subject to heavy environmental regulations and general government bureaucracy. In the 60s, it was so much simpler to build. It's a bureaucratic abomination to build anything now, from the federal to the local level. If you don't believe me, go ask a local contractor how hard it is to get a permit for something as simple as a house addition. And by the way, your house doesn't include provisions for handling highly enriched uranium, I hope, which a power plant would. And remember, it's not just about the plants. It's the transmission lines, the substations, and the transformers. And this is already causing problems outside of the main grid, outside of the problems we just discussed. It's causing other problems because right now, if a developer wants to buy an industrial backup generator, the lead time on some of the really good ones is 96 months. That's an 8-year wait to get a generator. And since data centers, power plants, dozens of other industries all need those, including hospitals, by the way, building at the speed that we're told we have to is going to cause massive downstream supply issues. We are seeing the same problem with substations. They're running out, voltage converters, running out of those, and even GPUs, right? The actual guts of data centers. And besides the physical materials, right, the stuff that we need in order to build all this, you can't just double the number of skilled workers overnight either. It's not a possibility. And all of this is why I'm far more worried about data centers now. And really for none of the reasons people are talking about. None of the reasons I thought I would be. So we do seem to be winning the local data center issue. But everyone that's built is a stress on the grid. It stresses the regional grid more and more. You can't argue that. We don't actually seem to be building power plants. We are building data centers. I see proposed plans for power plants and loosening up some restrictions possibly. I see proposed changes, but I don't see any actual power plants being built. And again, the power plants we start building now are for 2036. In the effort to keep so much of this secret behind NDAs and shell companies, like why? I don't understand it. I hate to be the guy that says, hey, if there's nothing to hide, why hide it? But I think that actually does apply to corporations, just not the American citizens. I feel like corporations do have a responsibility to share these things and participate in the solution, especially ones that are edging on $1 trillion. So much of the math just doesn't add up, and there is no chance that big tech and data center development companies haven't asked these same questions about power. All I do know is that no one seems to be providing solid answers here. The real issue is that we are attempting to do something with an incredibly powerful and novel technology that it's never been done before at a scale that's never been tried before, and all in a time frame that just doesn't seem to make any sense. If we thoroughly break our power grid, even in parts of this country, you're not going to be worried about how ugly data centers are or what they do to property values or the noises they create. We'll be facing a structural crisis that we simply haven't seen before, and it's not going to have quick fixes. So to do this right requires thousands of industries, honestly, to scale up at unprecedented rates. And if any one link in that chain falls behind, it may all fall behind. But this is the national or regional data center issue, right? This isn't the next local data center issue. And by the way, it's hard enough to get people interested in the things that will affect them immediately and directly, like a local data center. It looks like most of the time, the national data center plan issue is just somebody else's problem, somebody else's issue. It's something for another time. And maybe it is. Until it isn't. Until it's all of our problems. I don't understand how we solve the national data center issue. I wish I had better news for you there. I do know that everyone that we build is getting us closer to the point where we can't support it with our current capacity. And I do know that there are statements being made about power plants and regulations, but we are building data centers way faster than power plants. And all I see is plans to build power plants, not any new power plants. But this isn't all bad news. It's not all bad news. Hidden inside this, all of this issue, this massive challenge that our country is facing, might actually be the greatest economic opportunity of our lifetimes, or maybe even our children's lifetimes, if we do this right. If we do this right, this could be the biggest win for made in America, built by middle-class Americans we have seen in generations. Now, with everything I just said, how can I remain hopeful? Well, because I truly believe in American exceptionalism. We are a tough, gritty people. Our country was basically founded on, the geopolitical equivalent of hold my beer. Yes, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but that's also an opportunity because AI can't build physical infrastructure. We're going to need a lot of people to do that, a lot of time to do that. I might even say that this next generation, getting ready to graduate, should strongly consider trade schools or entrepreneurship over college. Again, that's another episode in and of itself. I grew up in Pittsburgh, where I saw pictures on every mom and pop restaurant's walls of guys who built 50-story skyscrapers without a safety harness. Right? That spirit is still here in America. Our country is back-to-back World War champions. This country puts jet engines in their main battle tanks. We built 10,000 plus 70-ton jet tanks with depleted uranium armor to win a Cold War, not even a hot war. And we did a lot of other things too. Have you ever seen a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier? Because they are floating cities powered by 2 nuclear reactors that shoot stealth jets off of them. And we have 11 of those, by the way. We built the SR-71. This country built the SR-71 Blackbird. It's an airplane that flies from New York to Los Angeles in 1 hour. And we built that in the 60s. I tell you these sort of outlandish things because it looks like we're going to need to do some outlandish things. It looks like we have a track record of doing them. I think that sometimes we get so caught up in yelling at each other on the internet that we forget how great this country is and what she's capable of. Recently, I heard a German visitor say, if you want to hate America, watch the news. If you want to love America, go visit it. Because recently the World Cup, the Europeans had come to our country en masse, and they fell in love with it. They fell in love with the people and the scale at which Americans do things. Remember, we fought wars against some of these people. And talking about war, let's talk about what happened in World War II. We won, right? We won that war. Because everyone who wasn't eating sushi or schnitzel was using our tanks, our planes, our food, our bullets, bridges, everything. Because we turned our entire industrial base into a war machine in a few years. I'm not taking anything away from the bravery of those who fought in World War II. But any historian will tell you, what we did industrially was incredible. Never been done before. At one point, German submarines basically gave up on sinking our ships because we literally were building the ships and packing them full of cargo faster than they could even sink them. In a matter of years, we went from housewives making apple pies on windowsills to Rosie the Riveter, right? Women in the workforce. And these guys were pushing out 420 plus giant long-range strategic bombers, not easy to put together, in a month from one factory. And that's before there was automation, right? Our industrial base has shifted since then, but the type of people who built it in the first place, that spirit, that's still here. And when pressure is applied, we have a history of pushing back. We're going to need a lot of modern-day Rosie the Riveters and good old boys. We're going to need a lot of those folks. We're going to need a lot of teachers because we need an entire generation of kids to build and organize things that have never been built, using tools that have never been used, and in ways that have never been tried, and we need to do it all faster than honestly seems possible at this point. We're going to need entrepreneurs to solve the problems of those supply chain issues and create solutions for challenges that have never been tried. We're going to need all the blue-collar heroes, right? The stuff that country music's made out of, to be getting up before the sun and coming home after it sets, because there's going to be a lot of work to do, a lot of hard, dangerous work to do, and a lot of money to be made. AI has the potential to make all of our lives so much better, but it can't build power lines. It can't build boilers or cooling stacks. We can. This is the sleeping giant that I still believe is here. But we got to start like now. It takes about a year to build a data center and a decade at times to build a power plant. I don't want blackouts. I don't want government mandated usage caps, and I definitely don't want everyday taxpayers paying for all the infrastructure to make all this work. The truth is that the AI that we have, as we have it now, is really only possible because of all the work humans already did collectively. Again, that's another episode in and of itself. In a very real way, big tech owes us. It owes our parents and our grandparents directly. So let's make sure we get our slice of the pie. Let's make sure we don't draw political lines on this issue, because that is the greatest danger surrounding all of this. Big tech is in all political parties' pockets. That is nothing new. But if we go rage blind because we hate the guys with the red hats or the guys with the blue hair more than we care about our own communities, I don't know who wins that, but I know we the people lose that. This giant project, for honestly all intents and purposes, is an arms race towards global AI dominance. It's going to affect all of us. That's what all this data center stuff is about. We're told our adversary is China, and I do believe that. But we're building power plants. They're building power plants. Like, they're building a lot of them. We seem to be winning this arms race now, and data centers are essential, right, to keeping us in that lead. That, again, topic for another episode, but I'll sum it up here. We want to continue to win that arms race, period. But winning that race can't come at any cost. I want to keep that lead. I want to win that arms race. But I am now concerned at the potential cost we may have to pay on the national scale. I think we can do it. I just am more concerned about that than I am the individual data centers now. We know that the rate at which we can and are building data centers is alarmingly disproportionate to the rate we can but aren't building our power infrastructure. So after being at this for over a month, here's what I have for you. If you care about your future, you need to ask questions about your local data center plan. It's not a dead end. They're not winning every time. Go, ask, put the pressure on, and you may get a great deal. Again, I didn't say fight against it. I said ask the right questions. Visibility and public unity are our best weapons for a better future in all of this. This can be done. And again, people are winning. It's not an impossible thing. For the national data center issue, all I have to say is this. We've done some amazing things before as a country, and it looks like this one might be up to us. I know this was a long video, but this is part 1. Maybe a part 2, maybe a 3 or 4. That's up to you. What do you want to know? Where do we need to focus next? The purpose of this channel is to bring you experts and arm you up with what is relevant to you, to keep you in the loop on what matters, and attempting to do that in a form that is reasonable. During filming this episode, we actually filmed 6 other episodes while it took me the time to get this out. So the pace is going to pick up dramatically, but here's the deal. Learn the tech. Protect your business. Stay informed. Protect what you've built. Protect what we have all built. And we'll see you next time.